Captain Midnight.
This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream. Get 2 great streaming services for less than $15 for the entire year, using my link in the description. The series finale of Avatar: The Last Airbender is easily the most discussed episode of Book 3. And really, why wouldn't it be? It's got everything you'd want from a series finale. And I thought a lot about covering it in this week's video. Now, I still probably will at some point, but the more I thought about it, the more I really wanted to talk about a very different episode. The Day of the Black Sun. Or, if you don't remember it from the title alone, the two-parter where our heroes lose. And lose pretty badly, too. Part of what works so well about this episode is just how disappointing it turns out for our main characters. So that's what I want to dig into this week. The eclipse, Azula, the kiss, and importantly, how our heroes losing this battle perfectly set up the rest of Book 3.
The world needs a hero. Master the elements. Avatar: The Last Airbender. The video game.
Let's start with who I would argue is the real protagonist of this particular episode, Sokka. Sokka is a character who has come a long, long way since the early days of the show. As I've said in previous videos, I came to the show a little older than most when they started watching it. And I think as a result, I actually kind of hated Sokka in the early going. I found him really annoying and thought his jokes kind of dragged the show back down into the kind of kiddie humor that you'd expect to find on Nickelodeon. In retrospect though, I've come to appreciate how immature he could be, because it set up one of the greatest character journeys in TV animation history, where he goes from an overconfident buffoon who sees himself as kind of the know-it-all warrior when he couldn't really be any farther from that, to not only walking the walk of being a competent leader, but learning to respect other people's power as well, instead of constantly belittling his sister at every turn. It's rock solid character development, and one thing I like most about it is it isn't just a simplistic straight line. Earlier in Book 3, we watched Sokka learn a lot in the memorable Sokka's Master. At the start of that episode, he finally confronts the feeling that he's the boring normal one in the group. No powers, no real skills, nothing. But after finding some guidance, he ends the episode being a pretty skilled swordsman. What I love though is that this also doesn't change who Sokka is on a dime. He may have come a long way, but the start of Day of the Black Sun shows that he still isn't that badass leader figure yet. Sokka begins the episode by completely falling apart when trying to explain his plan to everyone, looking less like a general and more like the guy who got thrown out of a haiku school. It's a better plan than his presentation would lead you to believe, but it still has its problems. The submarines being Sokka's idea is a really good touch, but so is the reveal that he basically showed off this idea by just making a crude, childlike drawing of it, showing us that Sokka has a ton of potential at this sort of thing, even if he's maybe not the best at expressing it yet. This idea is touched on again in part 2 of the episode, where Sokka, and not any of the bending masters, is able to recognize Azula's diversionary tactic for exactly what it is, and tells the group to not be distracted by her. But he's also the one that's easily goaded into a confrontation with her with just a few sentences, showing that he's on the right track and he has learned a lot, but he still has a ways to go before his transformation into a real hero is complete.
I just wish they would wear pants. Pants are an illusion, and so is death.
Speaking of Azula, let's talk about just how messed up the Fire Lord really is here. He likes to project an image of himself as this most fearsome, powerful opponent. And to an extent, that's obviously true. But he's also a sadistic, sniveling little asshole who isn't afraid to play dirty. Let me remind you, his plan in this episode is literally to let his teenage daughter, who is also temporarily powerless, to take his place and face the Avatar instead of him, while he just hides. Effective, yeah, but not exactly the move of someone who is completely confident in his victory. My favorite scene in these 2 episodes comes when Zuko finally confronts him and proves to his father that the manipulation he's used to keep his son under his thumb for his entire life no longer works. Zuko is not trying to impress his dad anymore. And like Sokka, it's really cool to see how much he's changed since that first season. He no longer sees that battle with the Fire Lord and his banishment as his fault. He sees it for what it really was, a grown man maiming a child in battle. He now knows that there's no way he could win back the respect of his father by capturing the Avatar and fighting with honor on the battlefield, because the Fire Lord is someone almost completely without honor. And as he's shown in using the powerless Azula as bait, he really only cares about himself. I also love Zuko's big speech about the Fire Nation as a whole, where he says he was taught the Fire Nation was the greatest civilization on Earth, spreading its greatness wherever it goes. But the truth is that they rule through sheer terror and fear. I think this definitely makes the Fire Nation a lot more nuanced than you would expect from the bad guys on a Nick cartoon. The show does a good job of showing how the people of the Fire Nation, who are clearly not all evil or sadistic like its ruler, can justify what it's done to so many other tribes around the world. It's really effective and smart world building and character development for Zuko at the same time. And not to drag this video down into bummer real world politics too much, but I think it's notable that this episode was written in 2007 and released in 2008, when opinion polls began to show the majority of Americans starting to view the war in Iraq unfavorably, making it a really interesting scene in the context of when the show was made as well, intentionally or not. On a more lighthearted end of the spectrum though, let's talk about the kiss. You know the one on the submarine between Aang and Katara that still has fans arguing to this day. Personally, I think Aang and Katara are too young for me to get invested in them as like a couple, but I definitely know this was huge for young viewers at the time, and I can see why, even if the shipping stuff doesn't really mean all that much to me. For me, what this episode really comes down to is failure. That's what this episode is, a giant loss for the heroes. Something I wasn't really expecting going in. The battle here isn't the most impressive the show would ever stage, but it was definitely cool. I especially love the moment right before the subsurface, where all of our heroes stand inside the vessel waiting for the battle to start any second, like the calm before the storm. For a few minutes there, the show acts like a lighter, kid-friendly version of the beginning of Saving Private Ryan, which I definitely didn't see coming. Now, the episode isn't a total downer, thanks in a large part to all the fun returning characters, but under all the fun is a real sense of loss for our leads. They weren't ready to face the Fire Lord, and proved that they still have a ways to go before becoming the versions of themselves that can. I think that makes for an odd episode of TV, but also a really nuanced one for an adventure show like this. Sokka, Zuko, Katara, and Aang have come a long way since meeting in the ice years before, and this episode perfectly shows how far they've come and how far they still have yet to go. Talking about TV shows like Avatar: The Last Airbender is definitely one of my favorite things to do on my channel, and if you're interested, there's a lot more of me doing that. Right now, on my streaming service Nebula, I have videos on Cheers and Rick and Morty, where I take a deep dive into what made those shows' title sequences work so well. Other creators have talked about the title sequences for Pokemon, Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, and a lot more. Not only that, but all videos I upload to Nebula are ad-free. And I'm far from alone. Nebula features creators like Lindsay Ellis, Just Right, Nando V Movies, and a ton of others. That's because stuff that might not work on YouTube can find a great home on Nebula. And if you sign up through Curiosity Stream, you also get a great documentary streaming service at the same time, featuring docs on history, tech, science, and more. Right now, Curiosity Stream is offering a 26% discount on the bundle, meaning you can get both for less than $15 a year. Not a month, a year. So get in on this great deal and go to curiositystream.com/captainmidnight. That's curiositystream.com/captainmidnight.
Here's a special tip for the fellas and girls who have not already joined Captain Midnight's new 1940 Flight Patrol. You'd better hurry up and join at once, because there's a big adventure ahead. The thing to do now is to get started, because we're going to have not only barrels of fun, but loads of free gifts and prizes too.